discussion on Asian American community grassroots movement in defending equal education rights and meritocracy. Let me present the panelists in alphabetical order. First up, we have Ms. Wai-Wah Chen. Ms. Wai-Wah Chen is an adjunct fellow at the Manhattan Institute and the founding president of the Chinese American Citizens Alliance of Greater New York, an all-volunteer organization advocating for equal rights for New Yorkers, especially in education. A relentless advocate for the Chinese American community, Chen brings her professional background in private equity to advance support for school choice and address issues faced by Asian Americans in New York. She is a graduate of Yale, Princeton, and Columbia.
She's missing one.
Which one?
Harvard.
I said no.
A basket of Ivy League schools. Okay. Next up, we have Mr. Bentao. Mr. Bentao is the president of the Boston Parent Coalition for Academic Excellence. He is dedicated to advocating for merit-based and fair admission to Boston's 3 exam schools: Boston Latin Academy, Boston Latin School, and the John D. O'Brien School of Mathematics and Science. BPCAE's efforts have positively impacted the Boston School District, allowing more students to join these 3 prestigious schools based on merit. Cui holds a PhD in engineering from the University of Minnesota and an MBA. And then we have our panelist, Ms. Asra Nomani. Ms. Asra Nomani is a former Wall Street Journal reporter and a senior fellow in the practice of journalism at the Independent Women's Network. She co-founded the Coalition for TJ, a parent advocacy and civil rights group challenging anti-Asian racism and promoting merit in education. Nomani is the author of Woke Army, the Red-Green Alliance, Destroying America's Freedom. She holds a BA from West Virginia University and an MA from American University. And lastly, we have Mr. Zhong. Mr. Zhong is a software engineering manager in Silicon Valley who came to the US from China in 1997 for graduate study. After his son, Stanley Zhong, was rejected by 16 colleges, but later hired by Google, Zhong launched a movement demanding transparency in college admissions. He has co-founded 2 startups, created a top-ranked communication app, and raised $10 million in venture funding. Zhong holds a PhD in electrical engineering from the University of Minnesota. And our panel will be moderated by Mr. Samuel Yan. Mr. Samuel Yan is a board member of the ACE and a community activist. He co-founded the 80-20 Initiative DC chapter and serves as its acting president. Since its inception, 80-20 has collaborated with ACE on complaints against Harvard's discriminatory admission policies against Asian American students, and fought for equal education rights on the Fisher versus UT case in 2015. Yan holds a PhD in math from Kansas State University. Let's welcome our panelists and moderator today.
This is going to be the last section to try to make it 60 minutes, not 1 hour. Let's start with how I started this journey. Right? 34 years ago, I came to this country, studied for my PhD program. What I found out in the college, American, a lot of them struggle with basic algebra. So I realized the American basic education K-12 has some problem. So hopefully, because this level you cannot educate qualified students to do quality work. And hopefully, there was some STEM-focused high school that gave us Asian parents some hope to send kids to study for STEM program to become a good student, qualified to do some qualified work. Those schools, of course, have some standard testing or have some strict requirements to get into the school. That's the whole reason. The process actually is simple. Understand why the colleges can to set the strict testing. However, the simple fair process has been under attack for a long time. Asian American students become the convenient target because they were mostly quiet and they were just focused on what study or work. So now we have a panel, all happen to be all Asian. Yeah, so we can share the topic of this big thing. We can say this kind of called Asian community grassroots movement in defending equal education. So if the panel have already very good experience in organizing those movements, so we can give them each of 5 minutes to introduce themselves, also mainly your work for the future of our movement. Could we start with?
Yeah, I have a suggestion that we'll go chronologically through the time. I think you were the pioneer.
Well, we started last year.
You started last year? Okay, then you're the pioneer. So you, yep,
When the lady suggesting we follow them.
yeah.
Actually, does this work or?
Hello, okay, we're all pioneers here. We're all domestic terrorists. One of the things that I want to say is that we've got a lot of good people in this room. I want to thank AECE. I want to thank all the people over here who've done tremendous amounts of work. You know, Gail, Harriet, of course you come, but that goes with AECE and so many others who've just left a little bit earlier. We're the last session, so we thank everybody. There are a couple of things that I want to mention also that are not about what I did specifically, but was mentioned before. We said PLF, help PLF. If you have any sort of concerns about particular cases you think may happen, that's important. But also SFFA, I will put a pitch in for them again, not just only for high school students who are trying to get into college, but also for college students who are applying to medical schools. Please, anybody who knows rising juniors, seniors, first-year medical students, second-year medical students, if you are applying now and didn't get into the ones that you wanted to go into if you were already a medical student, or if you are now currently applying, please, or thinking of applying, join SFFA. They've got lawsuits going on there. There are a number of other incidences also for other universities. Please, just think about it for your kids, your neighbors' kids, your cousins' kids. Tell them to go and join SFFA. Another thing is that we mentioned venture capital over here. If you know any people who want venture capital money, please, again, women who are white, particularly Asians, join the American Alliance for Equal Rights that was mentioned earlier today. That's another Edward Bloom organization structured the same way so that you can remain anonymous while you are a member and giving standing to the organization to sue. I know I'm using up my own time for this, for pitches for everybody else, but I think it's important. Now, I do have a couple of slides. If you could just put them up while I quickly go through what this is about. I am, with the Chinese American Citizens Alliance, we did a couple of projects that were primarily for education rights. In New York City, we have, okay, the next slide, please. This is just so that you know it's me. Okay, this is what it's all about. I'm gonna just walk over here so that you can see. This is what Every single case that we're talking about here is about how do we racially manage the outcomes of schools. This is the demographics of New York City, okay? So you can see that over here, Asian is about 16%, the blacks are 28%, Latinos, 40%, 13% of white. And so that's the demographics of the general population. In the specialized high schools, there are 8 specialized high schools. The top 2, Bronx Science and Stuyvesant High School, have generated, between the 2 of them, 13 Nobel Prizes in the sciences. Just remember that. That's more than a lot of countries have. And these are in the sciences. It's not just like, oh, it's another piece of work. All right. Okay, so what they do now, this is the current office before we started to get attacked for too many Asians in the schools. About 50% of the offers went to Asians, 3% to the blacks, 6% to Latinos, and 20% to the whites. So what were they trying to do over here? They wanted an outcome that would decrease the number of Asians down to 30%, okay? That's cutting it nearly by half because there were too many Asians. Did they become suddenly stupider? Suddenly lazier? The answer is no. It was just because they were Asian. They were going to try to increase, you could say, the number from 3% to 19% for the blacks. And yet, the Latinos to 27%. You could see here, that's the difference. That's what the goal was. And how did they want to do this? 7%. They were going to take the top 7% of every school. Whenever somebody tells you they want to take an X% of the top of many different schools, you know that that is a proxy for racial discrimination. That's what it is. They're trying to do it not just for the high schools, but also for the colleges, the public colleges in the state of New York. So for the city university and the state university, they want to take the top 10% of every school. Just think about that. When you talk about the specialized high schools, where maybe the top 100% should be able to get into the public universities, they want to do the top 10% of all, and there are some where nobody deserves to get into college. So we will just pass on that, and if you could just show now, that didn't work because we pushed back. The grassroots parents pushed back on this, so they abandoned the 7% plan, but we still have a discovery plan where they took away 20% of the seats. They took away 20% of the seats and say that what we're going to do is skip below the people who are usually supposed to get in and go all the way down below and just take them and put them up. Can I have the next slide? Please, the next slide. Okay, so it means that for the top schools over here, for Stuyvesant, the cutoff point, which used to be green, would go into red, and then what happens is that they're going to take a lot of students that missed all 8 specialized high schools. So there's a gap in their scores. These are by the scores. This is how the distribution is, okay? And so you, instead of getting all of the green bars over here, you've got to get a big gap in the scores of the kids. We're talking about merit in this conference, right? You're going to have a lot of kids, all of a sudden, that bottom 20% who were taken in because they didn't meet the test criteria. They're coming from here. So this was the plan. So now we're at 20%. What does that mean? What are the actual factual outcomes? If you could show the next slide, please. The next slide here, we have something called the Regents. It's a standardized test in the state of New York. And you could tell that the green part, which is how they admitted by the usual scores, this is after several years of implementing this 20% plan that they've taken away from the usual cutoff and reserved the seats for the people who would not have gotten in normally, and they are the red part. And what are the average scores on their regions, which is the standardized test? You can see, it's a huge difference. You're talking from 92% to 88. That's at Bronx Science. And this is 94.5 to 88.7. That is a full grade step. And we know, we parents who have worked with our kids getting into college, you know that is a significantly different kind of college your kid is going to get into based on that step. You're talking about possibly Ivy League to non-Ivy League. You know, there's a host of things that are happening in that big difference. Could we go to the next slide, please? So you see the same thing if you break it down by different subjects, in fact. It shows the same thing. We got this by a Freedom of Information Act request from the schools to get this information, because we can't just get it, you know, from all the students, but we got it for all the students based on a Freedom of Information Act request. And so you can see from history, living environment, which is bio, algebra 1, living environment, this is for 2 different years. Again, living environment, geometry, algebra. And you can see the difference again, pretty much 1 step each. So it's on each individual subject. This is for bronze science. Could I have the next slide, please? And this is science, it shows the exact same thing happening, 94.4, 89.2. The red marks are significantly lower. And that's what happens to merit when you do this. So we have to be on alert about all of these possibilities that are happening. That's what we are engaged in one of our projects, but there are other lawsuits that are happening. You have to think about how it also impacts the younger kids on the K-12, because it's not just high school. It happens earlier when they start attacking the gifted and talented programs, and they say that there are too many Asians, and let's turn it into a lottery. Whenever they talk about lottery also, that's also a problem, because lotteries are about just plain demographics. It means that you're going to just be representative in that way. So with that in mind, I think I'll pass it to the next person. Thank you.
Asra will be talking about TDA.
I'll pick it up, okay, I'll pick it up from there, because in the summer of 2020 then, I met you for the first time. And it was because we got an email on 7th of June, 2020, as America was facing a racial reckoning. What we discovered that we as Asians were on the wrong side of brown in this debate. And what we learned is that we were going to be the new scapegoats in America for the failures of our K-12 educators in being able to help those that were identified earlier, we talked about it, that had this quote-unquote achievement gap in our Black communities and in our Hispanic communities and other communities. And so on June 7th, 2020, what happened? Suparna Dutta, who's sitting here also, and we were parents of children at this high school, Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology in Alexandria, Virginia, rated the #1 high school in America by US News and World Report. Now I want to ask you, before I tell you what was in that email, how many of you have had ancestors or family that survived the Cultural Revolution? Can you just applaud and just clap your hands if you survived? Let's hear it. How many of you arrived in America as immigrants with very few? Clap, let's clap for ourselves too. That's right. How many of you came to this land with no land here, with no property? Your homes that you have now are your first property in this country. Those bank accounts that you had, that you created with little passbooks that I had too as an immigrant child, was your first money saved in this nation. And it was through education, just like my father was able to enjoy coming to Rutgers University in 1960s, just like so many of you, dollars in his pocket. I still remember the cockroaches that would run around our student housing as we turn on the light at night. We always waited 1 minute, to let them settle into their corners. We went to the flea market to raise money so that we could afford our rent. I'm seeing heads nodding. Suparna's story I learned that June 2020. She arrived from India with just dollars in her pocket. Her father had fled the violence of the 1947 partition that had happened in India. You know, these are our stories. These are our inherited stories. My father had lived through white supremacy of the British colonial empire, right? And where did he come? To America. To America to realize a new reality. But on that June 7th, 2020, we got an email from our principal, Ann Bodatatovas, who would tell us, you can remember my name because it rhymes with hippopotamus, but don't call me that, so you'll never forget her name. Ann Bodatatovas told us that the families of TJ needed to check their privileges. And so what were those privileges, right? Surviving the Cultural Revolution, surviving poverty, surviving, right, economic inopportunity in America. And that was when our grassroots revolution began. And that was when we made a phone call to the New York City parents. And that's why I wanted you to be able to begin. Because what we heard that day was that you must stand unapologetically for your values. So what was that word? I stumbled on it just a little bit, but be unapologetic in your values, right? Chien Koh, he said that to me on a Father's Day Zoom call.
Absolutely. You know, one of the things that I've often ended some of our rallies is go back and study. Don't apologize for studying.
Yeah.
Don't
apologize for your
That's right.
success. Yeah.
Don't apologize for the good things that we're doing for not just us individually, but for the entire community and the country. So don't apologize for studying and doing well.
And that's how in the summer then, that June, I spoke to my school board. We heard earlier about the importance of speaking to the school boards, becoming school board members. And I spoke for the first time ever to my school board. And I told them the words that have now rung true, which is that they had a woke revolution happening within the school system. And there was a father, Glenn Miller. He had gone to Harvard Law School, and one of his professors was a man that had become the father of these three words that Glenn told me I had to learn. And this was the book, the big red book, we could call it, instead of the little red book, of critical race theory. It's a word that a lot of you have heard about in the news. Why does it matter to us? I learned it, I studied it that summer. And why it matters is because one of the new ideologues of this idea put forward the principle that the remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. Can you imagine that? Aaron would just be shivering right now hearing that, because that is unconstitutional. That is illegal in the United States of America. New discrimination is not allowed to remedy old discrimination. And so with this knowledge, because we are all knowledge seekers here, with this knowledge, we created the Coalition for TJ at the end of the summer. We started with just 5 parents. And with those 5 parents, so many people from our local community emerged to stand. And this was the beginning of the parent protests that have become historic now in America. It was the Asian American parents who were the first to come forward in September 2020 in front of this dome that is the symbol of TJ. And that is when we started talking first to Erin Wilcox, the attorney that you just heard from. And Erin saw us. She saw us, and she didn't just see us as people of, quote, privilege, but people who were Americans who deserved equal opportunity. Erin is the daughter of a teacher. She believes in education, and she believes in the fair process to getting education for all. And so we fought, we spoke up, but that school board didn't care about our voices. They voted 12-0 to eliminate the test that was the admissions to TJ. And so those numbers that you just saw of New York admissions is exactly what the Fairfax County, Virginia School Board was trying to accomplish, which is this idea of racial balancing. We, the Asian community, are 20% of the population in Fairfax County, Virginia. Who are they? Many people from China, from Korea, from India. When America had a technology problem in the 1990s, they gave our families immigration visas, and now we have suddenly become a numerical problem for them because our children are 70% in the fall of 2020 of the student body at TJ. 20% is white, and then the other percentage is Black, Hispanic, and multiracial. So what they wanted to do was flip the number. They wanted to decrease the number of Asian American students, and so they rigged a admissions process. They reverse engineered it till they got the numbers that they would accomplish. And that was then in the spring of 2020 when Erin Wilcox and her team at Pacific Legal filed their lawsuit. And we won the next year. A federal court judge in Alexandria, Virginia ruled that this was patently unconstitutional. But the stubborn school board, just like the Virginia school board that Gail had talked about earlier in Virginia that refused integration, they refused the ruling of the judge. Because this is the history, unfortunately, of progress and the struggles of progress. There are many people who will resist actual equality. We have known this in the history of all of our countries. We have known that every country has a history of discrimination and racism and injustice, and it takes many, many, many fights. And so if you know this, we know that Brown versus Board of Education decision was the winning decision in the 1950s, but before that, there were many cases before that. And we had hoped that our Coalition for TJ case would become the Brown versus Board of Education case, but I hope that this Boston case will be that case because, as Erin mentioned, the Supreme Court justices did not agree to listen to our case. What does that tell me? That tells me that we have to become even more human in our American narrative. We have to make our stories told. We have to hit people in the heart so that they care about our narratives and our children, and that they care that these are children who should also grow up with no shame about their identity. They should feel no insecurity about who they are. They should have no low self-esteem. They should actually have confidence, right? Like all children should have. They should have glory, and they should know the best potential of themselves. So it was my honor then, when we heard about a crisis in Boston, that we got on a Zoom call, just like the New York parents had gotten on with us. And I will hand the microphone over to you now, because this is exactly how it is happening. The baton is being passed in this program.
Yes, we take the baton, take the torch, we continue. I'm Ben from Boston, Boston Parents Coalition for Academic Excellence. We are parents from Boston, city of Boston. You know, city of Boston has 3 pre-teachers schools: Boston Learning Academy, which used to be a girls' school, and Boston Learning School, which used to be a boys' school, and Zhong O'Brien Mathematics and Science School. And those 3 schools, every year, they take about 10% out of 50,000 Boston public school, and they get them enrolled. Those Boston public school only have 70% of 80,000 students in the city of Boston. So every year there is a very competitive grades to get into these 3 schools. As a parent, at that year, I have a daughter in Boston High School. I have a daughter in Boston Latin School, middle school, and I have a son who's about to enter Boston Latin School. And I have a high stake on these exam schools. And that year, the Boston Public School announced that due to the COVID, they want to use zip code as one of the criteria for students to get into the school. And this is a very smart move that covers the eyes of many parents, because they say zip code, that's okay. And they don't say that they are going to take out GPA, take out exam. But later on, we learned from our previous cases, New York and TG, this is a very dangerous move to us, especially to Asians, because if we do some simulation, because we have 11 parents joined the board of committee for our new organization, we did some modeling on the future projection of the students' proposition in terms of percentage. We found out that, for example, Chinatown in China, in Boston, we lost about 1/3 of the seats due to these new zip code allocations. And we parents, we have to fight this, and we formed an organization. We did some fundraising with about $200,000 to start the case. But that money didn't last long, only a few months, then we ran out of the money. Thanks to the Pacific Legal Foundation and Arian's her teammate, Chris, we were able to continue this fight through Boston Public School, because at that time, we were told that you are just a minority. You won't be able to fight Boston Public School because they have funding, they have a ton of lawyers, and even you win the case, your children already missed the opportunity to enter the school, because that's one time. And for me, I have 3 children. I'm determined to fight on this unpredictable legal case. We lost the case in the circuit level, but I'm glad that Pacific Legal Foundation was able to help us docket this case to Supreme Court, which is going to be decided in the coming months how they're going to handle that. But I want to tell everybody here that we need to be a role model for our own children. So if we think these things too difficult, we give up, our children will model that. We cannot give up. We fight and we show to our children as a first generation immigration how to survive in this country.
Looks like it's on the East Coast, it's tough. So let me share stories on the West Coast, see if it's any better. Just by a quick show of hands, so my son's Stanley story came out, hit the news last September, October. How many people actually know about it? Just quick show of hands. Okay, not too many. I want to share a little bit detail of it, because just to back up Gail, who mentioned a little bit earlier, that the thumb on the scale is not a feather. It's a humongous weight. And after you hear the story, you can draw your own conclusion. So my son graduated high school in 2023. As a self-taught computer programmer, he just loved coding contests. That's what he do day in, day out, almost to the degree of being insanity. Because how well he did in those online coding contests, competing against top professionals from around the world, he actually got a invitation to interview for a Google full-time job when he was actually only 13, because Google didn't realize he was a minor at that point. Well, the interview did not happen because Google could not legally hire minors. In 2020, when he was about 15 years old, you know, the lockdown caused by COVID, and the lockdown caused a huge demand for e-signing services. And he was unhappy that companies like DocuSign did not really offer any relief. He decided to build his own unlimited free e-signing service. he built it on AWS, well, that's Amazon Web Services. He did it so well, when Amazon did a well-architected review of his application, they concluded it's one of the most efficient secure accounts they have ever reviewed. And that was done, that was the point he was about 16 or 17. So Amazon did two things. They decided to feature it in the Amazon Web Service case study, which is an honor even hard for professionals to get. And second, they told him, well, we have a job for you whenever you're ready. And when Google got the news, when he was about to turn 18, Google moved faster than Amazon in this case. So shortly after he turned 18, he got a job offer from Google that typically requires a computer science degree, a PhD computer science degree. So there you go. You have an 18-year-old with a college degree getting a Google job offer that requires PhD. So the same achievements, plus 4.4 GPA, 50/90 SAT, the highest level of presidential service level award, was not able to get him an undergrad admission. So that's the difference we're talking about. Now, not to scare any guys in high school here, but you'd better know the battle you're getting into. And that's why we're here. So, of course, this doesn't make any sense. So we shared the story last September in a local Chinese WeChat group. And to my surprise, that the news spread coast to coast within 24 hours. It's like a spark in a tinderbox, because I guess the community is so fed up with story after this, one after another.
Right.
And after the story came out, ABC, CBS, CNBC, USA Today all reported it. I also received tons of emails. Apparently, Stanley's case is not alone. That is for sure. So it's not one outlier that somehow they screwed up, but it's part of a larger pattern. That is for sure. So we formed a group of a few thousand people, mostly California, kind of a, starting a similar fight over there. We were kind of naive, so we wrote to the, well, he got rejected by all 5 California, University of California campuses he applied to. So we started writing letters to the admissions office, we started writing letters to the UC Board of Regents, we started writing to the state lawmakers, governor, and what we got back was silence, stonewalling, or lip service. I'll give you an example of the letter we wrote to Governor Newsom. It's a letter endorsed by 4,000 people. Guess what we get back? Absolutely nothing. Nothing whatsoever. The governor just completely ignored us. And that's the situation we're facing. So it's very much an ongoing battle on the West Coast. Fortunately, it's not much better there, and we're definitely still pushing ahead.
That's amazing.
So along the way, over the past 9 months or so after the story came out, I made a few observations, and I think they'd be worth sharing with us. The first observation is that somehow there is this strange school of thought that Asians are being used as pawns in this college admission game. I don't know if you heard that. I heard that quite a lot. And I was like, what the heck? That's so offensive and ridiculous. So are Asians supposed to stay silent when their rights are violated? Is that what we're expected to do? Or are we not okay to build a political coalition? So I find this attack deeply racist. So if anybody has that line of attack, fight back. Observation number 2, a lot of people conflate affirmative action with racial preference. So in fact, there are 2 different things. So affirmative action is a larger concept that tries to help historically disadvantaged groups. It could be outreach programs, could be coaching, but it could also involve illegal practices like giving preference at admission based on race. So a lot of people in the opposite side try to model the picture by conflating it, by trying to mix these 2 notions, use them interchangeably. So let's not fall for that trap. Let's call them out. The issue at hand is racial discrimination. Let's point out every time we're in a debate. And observation number 3 is that I noticed that a lot of the people on the opposition side are actually beneficiaries of the current system. So admitted students, or faculty members who have built their career advocating for this kind of practice over decades. So of course, they are gonna be defending the current system. I have no problem with that, that's understandable. However, when some of them trivializes the damage to the victims, while claiming higher moral ground, that is disgusting. Observation number 4. Our opposition side also tend to use generic labels, things like racial justice. Well, let's dive into details. Let's be absolutely clear what the issue at hand is all about. It's favoring some minority groups at the expenses of other minority groups, mostly Asians. And is that fair? Let's look at history. Right? The US has a long and recent history of discriminating against Asian groups. Taking Chinese as an example, because of the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1982, Chinese are banned from getting US citizenship until after World War II. And Congress did not apologize until 2012. And that is only 12 years ago. And 4 years after the country elected its first black president. And discriminating against this type of group while waving its social justice banner, that is just ridiculous. Let's call them out for what it is. So if they're truly for social justice, why are they still attached to legacy admission? If they're truly for truth, why are they resisting the calls from us to get independent third-party examination of their mission data? Why they're hiding the mission data as if it's a crime scene? Because it's public case. So I think we have a clear fight in front of us, calling out what they're doing. And this reminds me of a childhood story that I remember very vividly. Maybe some of them will recall this. It's called The Emperor's New Clothes, right, from Anderson, the folk tale. So to me, people who are like the minister, who already built the narrative, claiming the emperor got splendid clothes, of course they're going to continue to defend their position and insisting they got it right. But let's call them out. It's time to call out the emperor got no clothes.
Everybody show the opinion of their experience. A little story also in Virginia, where I come from, Loudoun County. They have a co-pay policy from Fairfax County for the TGA. What they did is experiment for 1 year. All Indian Chinese go to protest them, never listen. Right? They just go ahead, do the policy change, admission testing change, quota, everything. So then we got almost like no power at all. So until one day, we Chinese got fed up. Okay, the reason for another reason, because they have now they call it equity committee, build out equity committee, including almost every minority but Chinese and East Asian. Then still okay. We didn't pay too much attention until the committee decided to including 4 additional cultural religion holidays to the school calendar. So they have a Indian holiday, they have Jewish holiday, they have Muslim holiday, they have another one. Just don't have in the New Year. Okay. So we're really mad. So you got mad for different reasons. So we just based on that fact, we got an organization built up called Chinese American Parents Association, CAPA, in Loudoun. Those ladies are very brave. They just starting with this, then we fight to get the New Year put on the calendar. Okay, so the way we do it is just face to face to them. Okay, just tell them why do that. So they dividing our development culture. There's no sense to add a holiday at all. You're supposed to celebrate the holiday together with your student at school, not take a break, right? That's one thing. Then because we found out the equity committee never including East Asian, Chinese, Japanese, or Indian. Actually, Indians have one, but they don't have Vietnamese, East culture means everybody they eat Chinese food, they never celebrate, they never know the Lunar New Year. So somehow I cheated into the committee, so I come from somewhere else. I got into the committee. Then eventually, you have to work with the school board directly, because once under the committee, you have an opportunity to look at what the policy they are discussing. Instead of they already presented, you file, it's kind of late. So by that time, I found out, because after 1 year, right, they already tried the new testing result. Standards who had, they try to get more Black, more Latino into the, they're called academy or Loudon. Then I look at the result. 1 year we ask for the result. Right? You get us mad. We want to see what the result comes from, right? How many Black are into it, right? How many white? Or you give us numbers. Then they have it. Yeah, they gave us. They sent us. I had the opportunity because I was on the committee, so I had a chance to read the report carefully. Then they somehow they of course Asian got like 30% cut, right? But Black didn't get any single one, no increase at all, no increase at all. But in the report they said they dare to say this, right? They said no change for Asian. No change to the shape, right? So I said, so you gave me the report, I just draw two bar charts. One Black flag here, Asian go negative 30%. I said, you tell me this no change. I said, Black no change, I agree, no number change. But Asian, with Indian, with Chinese, we all get punished, right? Because of the location we live in, we consecrate to middle school. So they had to change that. Based on this, then we start a movement, signature movement. We got 360 people sign up a campaign letter because that's discrimination. Clearly, like in TJ case, exactly. So we got 360 signature in sent into hand holding, sent to by that time. 杨廷尧的一个暑假 governor, so I sent to the Attorney General office, sent him hand to hand to him, but unfortunately he had to say wait until TJ case because that's almost like identical. But again, I was saying just you have to fight a very close fight, almost hand-hand.
And what I remembered, so the case that he's talking about is in Loudoun County, which became famous for other parental revolt movement. And just, I don't know if you remember this, but in August 2020, when that first decision was made to change the admissions to the Loudoun, it's the Academy of Sciences, the Asian families actually won. They won the vote to not eliminate the test. But then they had a recess, and they had a secret meeting.
One single support, switch vote, yes.
A secret meeting, 15-minute meeting, and the person came out, one person changed the vote, and the history of education then in Loudoun County shifted. And then the same happened in Fairfax County. Like this is done. We love America for its democracy, but the lesson in all of this is that we have to be the democracy too. You know, just like when you saw your son's injustice against your son, like even when they're ignoring you, you're not giving up, right? Yeah, they're not giving up. And they don't expect us to show up. Like, and when we show up, they're so shocked and they ignore us. But that's what happened in Boston. And in Boston, I don't know if you guys remember this, but then some of the families with East Asian names were on the witness list to speak. And the hot mic moment was when the board members started making fun of the names, you know, because they just, like on the side, they have that racism and that discrimination, and they had to all resign because it was a public humiliation. Like this is happening, and yeah, and we have, but only if we're watching, right? Then we can catch it. And that's what you were watching.
The question? Yes, go ahead.
So
the support of the racial equity. And first, I want to mention the effect. Many initiatives in this sort of meritocracy in middle schools are driven by so-called racial equity, initiative. Actually, in Boston exam reform in a policy guideline was driven by that, right? The support of racial equity, they frequently argue, says, you guys, Asians are overrepresented. Why you still want to fight? Why your fight is good for America? Please answer that, either war or Asra, I think, two.
I've spoken against the concept of representation. Over-representation, under-representation, it doesn't even make sense. Because when you go into a college, you're not representing all the other Asians, okay? When one of your kids go into school, you are not going to be representing all the Asians, getting the grades for all these other Asians, and when you go and get your job later, you're not gaining that money so that you're going to return it to all the other Asians. I mean, it would be nice if you do some charity, but that's not how it works. And underrepresented, are you really, how dignified is it to tell a black person that you're here only because you represent other blacks? Not that you are an individual. You don't represent your group. You represent yourself as an individual. So I want to first say that that whole concept to me doesn't make sense, and we should think about it in even using the term underrepresented. Because when the minute you use the word underrepresented, you're implying that there's somebody who's overrepresented. And I'm sorry, guys. That's what you will say. You're sorry, guys. That's not I'm sorry. You should be sorry to say that anybody is overrepresented when you are representing your own merit. It is not a case of anybody being overrepresented.
I want you to definitely answer the question because this is really the crisis in California too, where the schools have so many Asian students, and then they would argue this. But I would just say that, in our experience, these are the buzzwords that you can expect. They're gonna try to bucket Asians as whites. So they called us white adjacent, right? So that's a very popular way of trying to whitewash our stories. Yeah, and no offense to anybody who's white, of course, but of course we all have our different identities. And then they say that we are resource hoarding. So that's another term that you're gonna see thrown at you. That these are the concepts, but love to hear from you on this question too. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess at least in California, there is what's mentioned earlier, Proposition 209, which is a clause in the state constitution that any discrimination based on race is illegal. So I don't think people in California or the school board in California would come out and say those kind of things out loud. But what they try to do is, I mentioned this in one of the questions earlier, is that they try to do it without saying it in what's called unstated affirmative action.
Right.
Because they know if they're saying it and documenting it, they're going to get into legal trouble. So what they do is, let's just pretend we are rewriting the law, operating in a different study system, come up with a different result than the law requires, and then call that legal. They just blatantly call it. They just blatantly lie about it. And another example is that UCLA, Professor Sander earlier mentioned that Professor Tim Rosecrans actually protested while he was on the admission committee of UCLA for their hiding data from their own admission committee. I don't know if you guys know about this. UCLA hid its own admissions data from its own admissions committee and claiming they are doing a fantastic job. So Professor Tim Rosecrans quit in protest. And in response to that, UCLA finally commissioned a study to check whether there's any racial preference in their admission practice in compliance with the law. And the study actually concluded there is a clear racial bias against Asians. But guess what UCLA concluded after seeing the report? They said the system's all fine. It's working as intended. Thank you.
As intended. Yeah.
I have a quick question, and maybe for Wei-Wan and Aaron. A lot of these cases, when we win them, it seems like it's playing defense. Is there any of these cases we take to civil court so we can get a financial hit to these guys, and then the plaintiff gets, you know, civil case? Can any of these things be taken to the civil case?
Yeah, has any lawsuit involved financial remedy?
Yeah, yeah, we are. How about
Aaron,
you?
do you have a microphone for Aaron, or?
We're not looking for money, but Erin, do you want to answer that for our cases that we have?
The
That's
point
for
is one of the strategy,
Yeah,
That's
one
the
thing is
approach,
making
actually.
a strategy, so,
Yeah.
I'll try to toss out.
yeah.
But if you want to receive financial damages, you have to be able to, it's proving that you were financially injured. And I think that's probably the hardest part in getting financial damages. Thank you. I think that's probably the toughest part in getting financial damages in a case like this. How about this? Yeah? Yeah, we can hear just fine. That's generally why it's not done, is being able to prove a dollar amount that harmed a child. It's easier to, not easier, but an equal protection claim typically doesn't carry damages in that way. I'm not saying it's impossible, it's all about finding, I think, the right person, the right situation who can put a dollar amount on the injury that they suffered. But that's generally why you don't see those kind of cases.
Well, I'll just say that these kids that didn't get a merit scholarship for that, or they didn't get, what kind of financial impact did that have on their scholarship, on the earnings?
As Aaron says, it's very hard to prove. And there's also some difficulties with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, which the Supreme Court held, I think, 2 years ago, does not allow for like emotional distress damages. I am subject right now to a non-disclosure agreement, so I can only say what is public, that there has recently been a lawsuit filed against the University of Oklahoma that will deal with race discrimination in financial aid. And therefore, unlike some of these other cases, it's a lot easier to prove. They only gave me X number of dollars in financial aid, but they gave so and so. So it's much easier than what Aaron was talking about, where you're trying to say, okay, exactly how are you worse off because you didn't get into this university. We may be seeing more of these cases. At this point, we don't know. This case is in a very, very early stage, and that's all I can disclose, and it's basically all I know anyway.
That'll have a lot of impact.
Was there any other questions? Sorry, we're just, you want to go ahead?
I don't remember the case, but the issue came up, and there was a study that was done that said those who were accepted in the highly competitive universities who went to another school were just as successful in the other school they went to. So that there wasn't a way to prove this harm. So if you get into Harvard and go to a local college, from a career standpoint, they did just as well.
Yes, folks?
Equal, like a status case equal. Of course, the family who pay in-state tuition is that a financial damage. Yeah, he was rejected by all state schools. That's just, I don't know. That's a tough question, I have to know a lot
Yeah,
more.
we can always answer.
Here, that's right.
Question?
Here you've got an easily proved monetary damage. There's another wrinkle of this that has to do with 17th century English court systems, and that is your right to a jury trial. The university could insist on a jury if you're asking them for money in ways that you couldn't otherwise. So it gets kind of weirdly complex here.
Sorry, everyone's jumping in, but there's one other issue with these damages cases, and that is that you require an individual plaintiff who is willing to be identified and stand up if you're bringing a damages action. That is asking a lot, especially of a recently enrolled college student in our culture today, and I take to heart the admonition of everybody that we need to be able to make people stand up and be more proud of the positions that we're taking in the name of equality. But it is a real big hurdle to try to get an individual to stand up on a non-anonymous basis or not without an association.
But can we do class action, lawsuits?
So you call I did. We did that in 1994, right? And it was because we were concerned about mootness, right after the Thunis case. We researched the Thunis case and it ended up not being taken up. Cert wasn't granted because, so we did file a class action in the Ho case in 1994. And damages are very, very hard to prove, but one area of economic pain that can be caused is attorney's fees, right? In some of these cases, there are statutes that allow for fee shifting for prevailing parties. And our attorneys ended up getting all of their fees in 2000. But what is important to keep in mind is that the people we're suing are basically paying with our money. So that's a real problem. And damages are very, very hard to prove. Ultimately, I think, filing these suits, there's public shame, but there's also just, at the end of the day, I think hopefully what will happen is that people will be motivated to fight and vote. A lot of these people out of office who ultimately have responsibilities over our school systems at the state and public levels, but it's very hard. But attorney's fees are possible in some cases.
Right. Okay, thank you. I think this is the very last question because the time was up. But the question is suggested very good. We can go back home to brainstorm or type the question into open GPT to see if we can get some answers. Other than that, panelists, do you have anything to add up?
Because
Again, I want to thank everybody in this room for all the things that they're doing to support this. I want to just reiterate that whenever people hear these terms, like equity, you should always have your antennas up, okay? Because it means that they're going to try to find some way. And Asra probably has a whole list of all of these buzzwords. You could go through them. They're out to get you. And again, merit counts, merit matters. Standardized tests are a way of getting the right people in for most of these academic programs. And that's what all of our schools are fighting, because we have objective academic tests that are being dismantled. Tests that really do not get students by their race, their gender, their religion, their ethnicity, and to have that taken away is a damage to this country's values.
Yeah, I also want to add that one example I observed after the new zip code for Boston Latin School was that after 1 year, 1/3 of the new enrollment quit.
Yep, we saw the same pattern at TJ, and ultimately that's because, there's social engineering happening now that doesn't correlate with people's actual qualifications. The damages are huge in personal lives. In Fairfax County, Virginia, the assault on merit was so extensive that the administrators at TJ actually withheld national merit commendations for students. Yeah. My son received the Commended Student Award in the fall of 2019, or 2020, but I didn't find out till the fall of 2022, by the time he was a sophomore. So the message that we got earlier is true on this point too. Whether you decide to speak out in the public arena, at home anyway, stay vigilant, have the conversations with your kids wherever they are in the school experience, see what's going on in the school district, and continue to champion your values, that brought you to America, that made you make yourself a viable, active citizen. Do it in those values that you care about, because those are the values that are going to create the next generation in America, right? That we are creating what America will become. And so our voices are so critical in whichever way you have the courage to express them. Okay.
Yeah, I'll add that we started advocating for college admission transparency, and it's really surprising to me that the academic world, the part of the society is supposed to be open, that's supposed to be supporting intellectual pursuit, is so hostile to the idea of having admission data out there in the open. So sometimes other parents, sometimes also high school students, debate me, like, how do you know that there's actual discrimination going on? Your case may just be an isolated outlier. My response is this: let's apply a simple common sense test. Who is advocating for more transparency and more data being out there? The side that's trying to hide the data, you should be suspicious. And sunlight is the best disinfectant.
Right? We should call off the panelists leading the fight. Also, the whole thing, we Asian American leading the fight. Let's keep fighting.
Yeah.